Alright, got to take a look at this saw right here. And if you've been following the channel with this saw, I've run it quite a bit. But it's got a fairly significant piston rattle. And I figured it's actually a nice enough saw that I don't want to do what I normally do and let things blow up and then figure it out afterwards. So I figured what I was going to do today is just take it down and see if I can't figure out what's going on with the saw. So that's going to be the mission. Now the question is, do I have enough of my tools here to actually accomplish that? Because most of my tools are in the other shop now. So I'm going to have to make do with makeshift tools. Now I ran it with a 28-inch bar. And I mean, it runs good. So here's my dilemma. I really don't need to do things like add performance to the saw. It really makes enough power right now to do, you know, pretty much anything I want to do with a big saw. It runs that long bar, no problem. And it's a little hard to start. That's something I got to work on. I'm not quite sure yet I understand why it's hard to start, but it is. But that's a pretty nice looking piece. It works pretty good too, this Farmer Tech chain brake and side cover. So let me get the bar and chain off. These long bars make everything a bit of a pain in the neck compared to a normal sized bar. But I've kind of gone to the 28s on the bigger trees just simply because I can do in one cut, you know, one bore cut, pretty much everything I need to put that tree on the ground. And I'm getting to the point where I'm not as interested in fighting with it. I just want to get it done. So being able to make it in one bore cut right through, it's actually a bit of an advantage. Well, it obviously oils well enough. And these are metal clips on that top cover, which I think are nice. Big filter. Let's see if I can get that out. I know I'm going to have to dump the gas. I can smell it already. I've got a few saw projects you might find interesting. I do have a 394 that's been a little bit of a problem, and it almost seems to me like its issue. Oh, look at that, they break free. I'm almost inclined to anti-seize. I've had so many of these 394, 395s where those get frozen in the case. It might be the New York, you know, climate, but it's not something uncommon. And man, is it hard to get them out of there. Here's your top cover. It's also a nice piece. I do wish it had the steel inserts like the OEM does. That would be nicer. But these are metal and they're pretty strong. Got a cable, choke. I'm going to have to twist out of there. You know, I've got this breather for the tank, pulse line right here. You know, I wonder if I can leave the carb attached. Just pull the whole thing right off, leaving the carb attached. I wonder if I can leave the handle on too. That's going to be a little tougher, I think. But if I can leave that handle on, that's actually a benefit. I wonder if this will go through. So I want to pull the cylinder. I want to measure the piston, and I'm actually just going to replace it. And then I want to see whether or not that tends to make things a little bit quieter. I want to do it with as few parts disassembled as possible. That's the game here. Well, I guess I'm going to have to take that spike off. Like it or not. There it goes. I'm not going to let that stay out too long. That's an actual case screw. If I'm not careful, I'm going to end up with a leaky bar oil case there. Boy, I sure like to be able to pull it off with the carburetor and all, and not mess with the intake or nothing. I mean, it runs good. I'm tempted to try a different carburetor, you know, an OEM type carburetor. Tempted. Let's see how much is in there. A little bit. Take the pressure off and maybe it won't start bleeding out the top. Peel out the throttle cable, leave the pulse line, take off this, and peel out the choke. I think I can do that. Yeah, the choke is now out. Just turn it right out. See if I've got a small screwdriver I can get that fuel line out of there. There's a fuel line. Pulse line can stay right where it is. The only thing I have to get out now is the throttle cable. Alright. I think of all the things to mess with, the throttle cable is probably going to be the most difficult. Alright, let's see if I can get the cylinder out. They are not stripped, but they are not a size that I have. It's got to be English. So 30 T30 locked in there tight. Those are some long bolts. Looks pretty good on the inside. What I am seeing, I don't know if you're seeing it, I'll get the piston off of here, is it does look like it has accelerated wear happening. So, yeah, we gotta take care of that. Let me see if there's any damage on the inside of the cylinder. No, it looks good. That is the absolute best looking circlip I have ever seen from an aftermarket cylinder, where you don't have those big giant double loops on them. And this one here I bent up a little bit, so I'm going to try to bend it back. But alright, let's see if I can get this out of here. Yeah, look at that, came right out. No, both those bearings are fine. Usually you can tell if there's a little slop by doing like this. And I'm going to say that there isn't enough slop in either the wrist pin or the main bearing to matter. So that is not the problem. Well, I guess I'm finding interesting things here. I'm not quite sure yet if I found something definitive. But here's a VEC piston, or one from the Little Red Barn. And it's supposed to be a swap in. There's a couple of things that are interesting. Is look at the difference in where the rings are placed. These are much further apart than these. Not sure that matters. This one actually should run better because it has larger windows here. This one is a little bit window challenged. I don't know how much difference it'll make. We're going to find out. But when I'm looking at the differences in diameter, across the skirt, for example, this one here I've got at you can see that goes right to the 0, so it's like 2.2, almost into the button. Okay, I'm not going to go to the millimeter. This one here is 3 thousandths. Well, this one here is 3 thousandths smaller in diameter. Okay. So I don't know if that's because of the wear or because it was actually 3 thousandths smaller. Almost 4 thousandths. So it is smaller. But look at that. When you start getting off center, it's a lot smaller. Five to 6 thousandths. Where this one holds the same diameter. So there's no question that the skirt on this one here is larger in diameter all the way around, not just one measurement, but all the way around than this one here, which looks like it almost is like it's caving in or something. And we're looking at quite a big difference here. You see that? That's 7 thousandths. That's 5 thousandths smaller than this one here. That one's still pretty much the same. But this is a VEC cast piston. There's a few things about this I don't like. Even though its dimension here is, you know, almost 7 or 8 thousandths larger than the one that came out of the Farmer Tech, I don't like the fact that it has different wall thicknesses. We're going to put this in just to see whether or not that changes how much it rattles. That's really the goal of this piston, is just to test the theory that the piston is too small. It's not one I think I'm going to leave, but I'm pretty sure this one here has got some dimensional issues. Yeah, I mean that's a measurable difference in diameter right there. That's measurable. Even with calipers, we're looking at 5 to 7 thousandths difference. Interesting on my outboards. Let me see what they have for inside diameter here. So this one has about a 7 thousandths clearance between the diameter of the cylinder and the diameter of the piston. And that's actually a little bit large, but if I was to go by my outboard rules, it's actually pretty good. 5 to 7 thousandths is what they recommend on Johnson outboards. With the air coolers, they might want a little more, I don't know. So let's put this piston in there. Let's just put it in. I don't believe it's going to be a permanent solution. You know, I might get something different from Farmertech. I'm going to talk to them and see whether or not they would prefer to put something else on just to test the concept. But this piston here is obviously dimensionally off. There's no question. And because of the way it's rocking, it's got accelerated wear. And I'm going to tell you, I think because of the oil, see there's blow-by too, there's quite a bit of blow-by. I'm a little surprised at that, you know. Now, I'm going to speculate that one of the reasons why that thing is still running is because of the heavier oil mix. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I think caters to the heavier oil mix. Now their wrist pin diameter is fine. There's nothing wrong with that wrist pin. There was a thought process that maybe it was the wrist pin, but I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that's purely the piston. I mean, that's loose. I mean, I would like a little tighter fit. Let me see what happens with the one that comes with the VEC piston. Well, let me put it this way. It's a piston made by VEC, sold through Little Red Barn. No, they're the same diameter, same slip fit. All I'm going to do is change the piston itself. That's all I'm going to do. Man, I'm tempted to muffler mod this thing. The one takeaway I have from this particular saw is if you like working on saws, you like tinkering, this is an excellent chassis. Look how easy that was to come apart. Look how easy it is to take this whole system off. You know, I might even have an OEM top end. Man, I wonder if I could put that on. Yeah. I'm not going to even change the gasket. I'm just going to 1184 that gasket. You know what I'm saying? Clean this up. Looks really nice down in there on the inside. Crank looks nice. Everything looks good on the inside. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. It's 205. It measured, let me put it back to where it was. That's what it measured in diameter, right? And the piston is right there. So there's a 4 or 5 thousandths difference in the diameter of the piston relative to the cylinder, and that's acceptable. I'm not going to argue with that. That's fine. Arrow to the front. Look how easy it is to work on these. My God. So I think the two things that I see here is there's actually a difference in the way the pistons are designed. Okay, I get that. And there's definitely a difference in the tolerances on these. They're all different. Alright, let's see if I can get that. Alright, let this set up, and then we'll come back in an hour or two and see if I can get it to start. What do you think? Alright, I'm going to slam this thing together and just see if it'll fire up and see how much it rattles. But I got to give you a couple of impressions. Yeah, that piston is definitely out. I'm not sure that's going to fix the problem because the cylinder could be out as well. But the one that came with it was closer to 10. And that's a lot. So that was too much. Now the question I have, and I think the 800-pound gorilla in the room is it just the piston that's off, or is it the piston and the cylinder that's off? That's what we don't know. You know what I'm saying? The second takeaway I have is the quality of this saw, the parts. I mean, there's a few places that are a little chintzy. That's a little thin, and the handle is pretty much, well, what I've seen before. But the plastic and the cases, the cylinder, the inside of the cylinder, stuff like that, really looked a lot better than what I'm used to seeing from Holzfforma Tech and companies like them. This saw right here is. This is a saw that makes you sort of, you know, take pause. What are you looking at? You know? Now the Husqvarna layout, it's a little easier to deal with than the steel anyway, you know, this era. And the 660s, they got a lot better, 440, stuff like that. I even think like the 461s and some of the later ones like that are reasonably easy to work on. But for a hobbyist, commentary on this saw is going to be, you know, people want to know how it compares to the 660, right? This one is a lot easier to work on. But the 660 is a lot easier to live with because of things like the chain adjuster being on the cover and the internal clutch, external sprocket, things like that just make the 660 a little easier to deal with. And I may be wrong, but it feels to me like the 660 is quite a bit lighter than this saw. With how easy this saw is to work on, I will take those inconveniences for a hobby saw and just enjoy the fact that this thing is a beast. Yeah, it's a little harder to deal with, you know, in some respects. But for a person who likes to tinker and play with the carburetors and change cylinders and pistons and stuff like that, all you got to do is just watch this video. And I had this thing apart and back together again, literally in probably 2 hours. And there's nothing special required to do that, you know. So should you go get like a different aftermarket top end that might be a little bit better, whether it's a Meteor or something like that, the actual work required to put this thing together is actually minimal. Okay, this thing is virtually out of fuel, so I need to go get some gas and put it in here, and we can test it and see whether or not it rattles. And I think I'm going to call that a video, because really, If this runs good with that piston and it doesn't rattle like crazy, that is a solution. It may not be the best solution, but it is a solution. And this piston here that I got in that box only cost me like 40 bucks delivered. And using the same gasket, a little bit of elbow grease, and 1184, you might want to do that anyway, because you get a better piston with a pop-up, you're going to get a little bit better performance. So, on the one hand, the argument is it should run and should work well with the parts that came. On the other hand, part of the advantage, or part of the beauty about these Holzfforma saws, is you're just not going to leave them alone. You're not going to leave them stock. You're going to add things to them and put better parts on them. That's part of the fun. So, it's not as much of a detraction having to swap out a piston. You know, you're going to do that kind of thing anyway. So, what did I really lose? Now, that's assuming it works. So let me go get some gas. I'll shut this off and we'll fire it up and see if it actually works. Alright, we got gas and oil in there. Let me just see if I can get it fired. This was a problem to get it fired before, so see if it's better today. Turn that choke off. Okay, I can tell you right now, I don't know if it's going to show up in the camera, but that has a totally acceptable amount of piston slap. It absolutely sounds differently than the one it had before. I guess what I'll do is I'll try to find some footage from before to where you can make a comparison yourself. That was definitely an improvement in the way it sounded in terms of piston slap. And as I pointed out in the video, there was a measurable difference. Now, the hard starting is really not the saw, it's really me. I just can't turn it over fast enough. And I just noticed that I left the air filter off. It pulled up really quick. So I think part of what I do is number one, don't have the snap I once had, so getting it started is a little bit tougher. And the second thing is, in the past, I've left the choke on too long, because it literally pulled right up about pull number 4. And so this really, I mean, what that tells me is really this is a good functioning saw for a person who has the strength to run it. How's that? And maybe what I'll do is I'll try to lean it out a little bit in the bottom. And but I don't have to go figure out why it's not getting fuel. In fact, it's getting a lot of fuel. The choke is working just fine. So it's nothing related to that. It is more related to my arm strength and how much speed I can get that saw to spin over at, you know, when I pull on it. I'd say that's probably the biggest problem I have, is I just can't generate the snap anymore. Based on what I saw in that carburetor, the way it pulled up, I would say that there really isn't a big issue based on fuel lines, fuel system, stuff like that. Now, another thing I might do on this saw here, because it's definitely worth sorting out, the more I play with this saw, the more I like it, is I might try to blend a OEM Holzfforma ignition that actually might fire at a lower RPM. I would say if anything, it's running a little richer now than it did before. So I need to see if I can lean that out now. Alright, that's much better all the way around. Sounds better, starts better. I did take quite a bit of fuel out of it too on the bottom end. I kind of went back to basics because I was running it kind of fat. But basically I've got that low speed 1 1/8 turns out. And it's running pretty good. I'm gonna Now, that to me is a totally acceptable amount of piston slap. Every saw I've ever run has some. And that's nowhere near, not even close to being as loud as it was before. So I would consider this a success. Coming back from Boonville, and it's stormy. And this is the CSX line.